Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 645, recorded live on Wednesday, July 28th. I'm your host, Patrick. We have a very special show today. It's another Ask the Devs. So we have a full house with devs today, including Cordovan.
Hello, nice to be here.
Lynnabel.
Howdy.
Steelstar.
Hey.
And Torc.
Hello.
Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here again. See, just some basic stuff. DDOCast, we like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can watch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by Cyber Ears, the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. I am planning on having a show this weekend, mostly to talk about some information Jerry just dropped on the weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream, looking at Salt Marsh and some stuff with that. But that was new as of 3 hours ago. So
yep. So old news at this point. We're releasing Salt Marsh next week. At least that's the plan. It'll be Wednesday, August 4th.
But we'll be talking about that as hopefully this weekend at some point. Right. So we're gonna talk with the devs, and our focus today is going to be on, because there's a lot of stuff going on. You're releasing Salt Marsh. You somehow previewed update 51 before previewing update 50, which I think that's the first time that's happened.
Yeah, probably.
Moving
stuff around.
We're going to really focus on kind of the changes that are going to be happening in the epic landscape. So the monster changes, the endgame itemization, Destiny revamp, the leveling revamp, that kind of stuff. That's where our focus is going to be. If we get through all of that and we get to the end, and we might have time to look at some other stuff, but that's really where we're going to focus. And just kind of a place to start. Big picture. Why are these set of changes coming to DDO? What's kind of the big picture goal?
We want to revamp the game.
Okay, so we're going to be doing level cap increases soon, and we wanted to basically rebuild the epic system to smoothly support going into a new level cap, which is the way the system was currently structured could have been, it would have been much more difficult to work with. So that was part of it. And the other part of it is that the Epic Destiny system hasn't aged well. There was a lot we wanted to fix with it. And it's kind of wonky, especially when you it was designed for like levels 20 to 25. And then we had grown from there, and we wanted to smooth that out. There was basically some tech debt there.
And even then, the current Destiny system provides a big barrier to entry for people that have done a lot of playing in Heroics but want to get into Epics for the first time. It's very, very difficult to do so, much more than it should be. And so this system helps smooth that out by a lot.
Yeah, and for this thing, like for it's not just Epic Destinies as a whole, it's also like the leveling flow and streamlining our XP types in epics and streamlining our feats in epics and stuff like that. Like it's the whole 9 yards from 21 plus.
So it sounds kind of to me like, as opposed to building upon a tower of cards that's already in place, you wanted to give a more firm and stable foundation to build off of.
Yes, we're going to glue all these cards together. And don't have to worry about anything precarious anymore.
I mean, we get a lot of feedback on Epic Destinies over the years. Tons of, hey, you should do this. Maybe this would be a better system, all that sort of thing. And then now is a really good time for us to do that kind of holistic changes as we're both looking ahead, toward a future level cap, but also really working to get the 20 to 30 experience in a kind of polished state here for the current environment. A lot of this work is stuff that we could have done potentially a couple years ago. But now's the time really to get that done. So we're taking the opportunity to really do some pretty fundamental updates to the system to address gameplay and other kind of feedback that we've had over the years.
It's definitely not just about the level cap increase. In fact, I would say the majority of this is getting it so that epics feel as exciting, feel as engaging, feel as fun to progress in. with the rest of the heroic game, which we're very happy with. It feels good to level up in heroics. It feels good to put points into a build and figure out all these new cool combinations and stuff like that. And then epics, we can change the meta, but like it would be us changing the meta rather than people finding out new combinations and stuff. And we like the whole system is just could stand to be a lot smoother.
Well, let's talk about the epic leveling Destinies kind of. We can lump them together, or if you guys want to kind of talk about this separately, that's fine too. But so, what about that part of it doesn't work now, and what do you want to be different?
I mean, the initial, like, if you're just a brand new player, like you've never played an epics before, the idea that you could get to level 20 and then go, oh, I now need like 20 million experience just to have the same amount of character depth as everybody else does not really feel fun. Like, if you're in heroics, you don't need to level up in order to have the privilege to put points into Sacred Defender. Like, you just put points into Sacred Defender and then you're a Sacred Defender, you're fine. You don't need to go the extra mile just to allow full access to that system, or at least not in an in-game sense. And with epics, it's completely turned on its head. Like, at a whole, we really want epic leveling to feel as fun and as engaging and as cool and as snappy and as awesome as heroics do. And we're very happy with how heroics level. We want to bring that to epics. So with that in mind, we're drastically streamlining how players advance. Rather than leveling up individual destinies, you'll just level up the same way you do now. And then you'll get points when you level up when you put those points into your destinies. And you can mix and match your destinies now, like they're kind of like enhancement trees. Rather than having to swap between them. And the whole thing you just build up your character as you level up. And it's a lot easier to level up now. We're also moving the levels at which you get feats, so you're going to get a lot of feats a lot earlier, rather than right now, where for the first few levels, there's not a lot of advancement outside of leveling Epic Destinies. And the bad side of that is that if you're done leveling Epic Destinies, you don't get really any advancement at all. So Epic Destiny feats are going to be coming a lot earlier. We're revamping and retooling a lot of how those feats work, and cutting like 20 of them, the skill feats, with the intention that as you level up, we have this nice chart on the forums. Every single level, you get something that you've unlocked, either a feat, or you unlock a new tier, or you get a new core ability, or something. All the way up, with the exception of level 29, which doesn't have a thing in that thing. But we're going from 3 blank levels and a lot of backloading to 1 blank level and a lot of front loading. A lot better.
So, what's new and exciting about the changes, besides the leveling process?
Just new cool stuff. These Destinies are rebuilt from the ground up. They've got a bunch of new cool abilities in them, and a lot of the stuff that was in there before that players just didn't use or didn't want or didn't work is just completely gone, and it's replaced by like just awesome cool stuff.
It's two things. We've learned the Destiny trees were pretty old, and we've done a lot of enhancement trees since a lot of them were originally created. And we're just frankly like we have a lot of new things we can apply. And second, like now it's going to be a lot easier to mix and match. But that's really the big structural perk of the system. It's going to be and you will be able to do it a lot sooner. A new player, like a player just coming into Destinies, as opposed to someone who's been around the loop a few times, like they can immediately start spreading out. And kind of having that, the typical thing we've all taken for granted in heroic of combining trees and figuring out what they want to do with their builds. They have the whole experience to the epics. Well, the current system is like you kind of have to like stay in a tree and then like grind out through, and then you have to switch, and then eventually you can unlock twists, but that's a lot more limited. So your build meta should be a lot more exciting for the whole arc.
Yeah, play the Destiny you want while you're doing the level up process. In addition, spend points in multiple trees there to kind of tweak your build in the way that we've had that depth and complexity in the enhancement system. We're bringing some of that to the Epic Destiny system while really removing this whole, well, I'm in an off Destiny. There really won't be any reason for an off Destiny with these changes.
Yeah, like in heroics, if you're not using part of your build, like if you're not a vanguard but you're a paladin and you don't put points in your vanguard tree, then that's fine. It doesn't penalize you. But if you're playing in epics and you need experience from a specific sphere, or you need to level up that thing, there's really no substitute. And the idea that we would essentially force players to play in trees that don't match their build or don't make sense or don't do what they want, maybe they just don't like them, we're like part of this overhaul is we're just removing that entirely. Like you just play the build
Right.
that you want with the trees that you want.
The versatility available in the new set of trees and the fact that you can mix them a lot more than you could before means just about any kind of build should be able to find something that works for them in ways that the old system really just could not do.
Well, my question for that then for you, Steelstar, is which trees is the double rune arm artificer gonna be?
You'll see. You'll see.
Yeah, you'll see.
You'll see. There's a bit of a
Probably
spoiler with
not
that.
coming in 51, but maybe sometime
Yes.
down the line.
Plans within plans.
Yes, the filigree sets for Saltmarsh have a little bit of a spoiler with some of our upcoming tentative plans. So I'm sure if you poked around with those, you'd probably figure something out.
I seem to think that players like the teasing out spoilers like that, right? It's been a while since Jerry's put a good puzzle on the forum with spoiler information. So,
well, there is one big puzzle in Saltmarsh that I will estimate around. It'll take 2 months for people to figure out. So good luck. Took people 1 month for the dull dagger, and this is 8 times as complicated. So
I'm sure people will enjoy that. Let's talk a little about the Destiny and Scion feats. So there's a lot of changes happening there. What's kind of behind some of those changes, and where do you expect players to land after those changes?
like our changes to the specific legendary feats, Destiny feats. Well, we have this weird problem where a lot of our epic and legendary feats right now are they're either really, really, really good, or they don't work, or they're just forgettable and people don't like them. And so part of this is like we drilled down. And it's either like the feat economy for the like epic and Destiny ones because you can miss a match, but for the legendary ones, they just kind of are weird. Like if you like the idea that individual elemental caster ones had different bonuses statistically meant that certain builds just did more elemental damage. So like those needed to be standardized. And we also needed to represent poison and force and like illusion magic and stuff like that. And like you'll just be missing DCs before. Like we just essentially with the legendary feats went through and just went, okay, every caster feat gets a DC that makes sense, or 2 if they're like a transmutation conjuration, and everyone gets the appropriate amount of spell critical damage. And we're taking the global stuff out of fire, so every caster doesn't just pick fire. And we are planning some to be determined either additional feats or revamps of current feats beyond what we've revealed, but nothing that I would feel comfortable promising right now on a live stream because they're a little wacky, and I don't
Yeah.
want to
We're,
commit.
Despite having done one preview for 51 already, we're still fairly early in the process, all things considered. So a lot's subject to change and a lot hasn't been decided yet.
Yeah, preview 2, you'll see a lot of stuff, a lot of changes. But that's going to happen. Like we're going to be doing a lot of previews on this, so
You'll be wielding 6 rune arms.
well, because you'll be on Marilyn.
Yes.
That could be possible, actually.
Can you talk a little about your plans to bolster up some of the feats, tying them in with some of the Destinies?
That's something that we kind of like part of our post preview stuff was that like some of our feat tie-ins were way too strong and some of them were not cool enough. And sometimes like even with the tie-ins, the base feats just need to be improved. So like we don't want to commit to anything on this particular vein, but like we do have, I would say, a better grasp of how that tie-in thing will fit together.
Yeah, I think that it's conceptually likely to stay around where you'll see spots in Destinies that say, oh, it gives this bonus, but if you've got this epic feat, it gets a better version of that bonus. But yeah, we need to readjust some of the numbers in some of the places.
It's a little bit of economy synergy where action points and feats can feat picks interact.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit of twist in the build meta that kind of open up some interesting possibilities and perks.
Talk to us about Magister. Magister's going away.
Yeah.
What about Magister doesn't fit into the new system? And maybe if you want to
Magis-
tease what's replacing it, feel free to do that too.
Sure. So Magister in the existing Epic Destiny system had a really specific niche, and that niche was all of DC casting. We'd had a problem before a couple of years back where people were mostly diving into, I think it was Exalted Angel, because if you twisted things properly, it could get you the highest DCs possible, hard stop. And then we did some adjustments within the last year or two to help Magister, which was kind of supposed to have that role, get to those numbers as well. But we're in a point right now where if you wanted to do DC casting, and DC casting is very broad in DDO, there's a lot of classes that can do it and a lot of different kinds of DC casting, you have to go Magister. And we decided when we were starting to look into the new Epic Destiny system that we didn't want that to be the case. DC casting is too broad to be confined to one Destiny that has one playstyle. So we decided to take DC casting and distribute it through a whole bunch of the trees. I think more than half the trees have some kind of DC casting in them. I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's somewhere around half. Have DC casting support, so that if you're looking to do a particular kind or particular schools of DC casting, there are a number of trees that cover those bases that supply a number of playstyles and a number of extra things that you might want in that build. That left us with a hole to fill in the initial 12 Destinies, and we started looking into, well, what do we need a Destiny dedicated for in here? And some of the things that we came up with were cold damage, debuff, spell penetration, negative damage, which is where we came around to the Destiny that's going to replace it, which is Magus of the Eclipse. And we're going to have more details on what exactly that tree looks like down the line, but it's going to be cool.
Yeah, like the intention here is to go from, oh, I'm a DC caster, so I got to be in DC tree, to, oh, I'm an enchantment caster, so I have these choices of all of these Destinies that support enchantment. That's different if you're like a necromancy caster. So depending on the type of DCs you want, you'd end up in different places, which really encourages build diversity.
I do have to say, I am really looking forward to the next preview, because you all previewed the Destinies that I'm least interested in to see the revamp state first, and all like the ones that I'm most interested in are the ones that we didn't get to see yet.
So
we did it on purpose.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Just to be clear, which Destinies? Is it like just all the ones we didn't do, or is it just like
pretty much?
I was going to say Fury of the Wild was in there, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, Sentinel and Draconic Incarnation. Like, those are the two trees that I probably used the most.
Draconic, I'm quite happy about it. I can say this: it got expanded horizontally, so it now supports more elements than it did before. So rather than just fire, water, air, earth, it also has negative and poison for a green and shadow dragon.
Nice. Growler was asking in our chat, what does this system provide for level 30 plus? If that's something you can answer or ready to address.
Sure. I mean, the top tier, the tier 5 of the trees right now is min level 30. So when you get to 30, you unlock some of the top end abilities in the tree. In terms of what it means for levels beyond 30, we're not super ready to talk about that yet, because that's going to, be something we get into as we get into what the level increase actually looks like.
Which I'm guessing you're still probably iterating and fine-tuning and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's not in update 51. It's even further out, so it's going to be a bit before we have those details.
Yeah, and as we've said on the forums, we're very cognizant of how this game has handled level cap increases in the past, which is why we're taking our time with it. So we really want to make this work.
I was just going to say, we do have a enhancement experience that generally is the choice making from 1 to 20, and the Epic Destinies, which is generally some of the big choice making you'll make from 20 to 30. The intention of the Epic Destiny system is really for the epic levels. I mean, clearly it's going to impact everything else in the same way that enhancements do. But I don't know that this Epic Destiny revamp, is being debuted specifically with an eye towards some future level cap of whatever it's going to end up being, right? I think the focus is really on the current system. But it is about the current flow as much as it's about a future flow.
Right.
Yeah. there's a lot in the current flow that, like, we would, even if we weren't increasing the level cap, we probably would be doing a lot of what we're doing right now because there's just problems that needed to be fixed.
Yeah.
But in terms of if I'm interpreting the question correctly, like I'm a level 30 player and I want to know what this is kind of end out like. You're probably going to get a little bit more build flexibility, or a lot more, depending if you had a ton of twists. If you had a ton of twists, you're probably going to end up about the same at the top. And in theory, like as we move on in levels, that's when we'll be expanding. Where you have more, but if you do not have a lot of twists, it will feel a lot more flexible at 30. Because you need a lot of twists to make up for the extra. You're just gonna have more raw points, and and 3 trees to work with.
We are definitely building this system with like our future plans in mind. Like we're not going to turn around and like put it in the trash and build a whole new different thing on top of it.
Yep.
Right. So there's a couple parts that I really wanted to kind of focus on from some of the feedback. The first one was the charge, building, and spending system. So in the past, Epic Destinies used to have charges, but they were removed, and I think most players really like that. So what about this charge system that you were kind of looking at and playing around with? What's different about that, and what do you think players, particularly like myself, who really didn't like that charge system, what do you think we're going to like about this system?
Well, so let me start that we're probably not going to mass apply the charge system like we did in Preview 1. After taking the feedback and kind of doing a lot of analysis, we weren't really happy with where it was going. So while you may see a similar charge system in an individual tree somewhere, or maybe down the line in a universal tree, we're not going to have that in Preview 2. We're already kind of pivoting off of it. So what we were trying for is the charge system wasn't really created to go back into the epic moment space, which is what we had way back in the day. It was more to create a burst of power in a midpoint or a late point in a fight, where we wanted you to have this moment where you get into a fight, but you have a powered up ability that you wouldn't use right away, like a lot of our good skills you just fire right at the open. We wanted you to have a burst of power kind of later in the experience. And that kind of didn't work out terribly well in Preview 1 because of pacing. People were basically like finishing the encounter too quickly before that burst of power could really manifest, unless they were playing over their head. They would have to, if they were playing really up in difficulty, maybe they were hitting that point. But in main play, we hadn't calibrated right. Now we could have fixed the pacing problem, but we had this other problem that we didn't really like how the charge system was almost immediately starting to constrain the build picks, and we could have done a lot of work to try to fix that, but the advantage of getting this little burst of power kind of in a later point in combat, compared to the complexity of trying to balance all that out, and just kind of the initial reaction, we're kind of backing away from it right now. So we're going to take a rev where we're not that is going to be charged. Like we kind of anticipated this. We didn't actually put a lot of eggs in the charge system as much as it was prevalent in all of the trees. We sort of kind of we're in our minds, we are still sort of at a pivot point where we're like, well, maybe we'll see how they like it, and we'll go in if they like it, and if they don't like it, then we might pivot out of it. So it looks like, pretty sure we're pivoting out of it at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of the benefits of doing previews so early is like we just, if people don't like it, people don't like it.
Yeah. So yeah, by the time you see it in Preview 2, it's very likely that the system won't be using the kind of builders and spenders that you saw in Preview 1. We're taking a few things back to the drawing board. We're working on a lot of the feedback that we got in Preview 1, not just on that, but on the trees in general and on the system in general. Should be interesting.
It was kind of a proof of concept flyer kind of a thing.
Yeah. We'll we'll hopefully be doing a lot more of those because every now and then you strike gold.
Yeah, it's part of why we ran so early, so that we would have the time to pivot like this if we wanted to.
I do like the idea of having that burst kind of mid-fight.
How they work.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's how the system works. Like,
I mean, I did a
think
lot of. Go ahead.
I think a lot of the people look at this and were very wary of the system based off of how they imagined it would work, which is why the comparison to like the old epic moment charges, like they operate completely differently. They're a different thing. And like that comparison doesn't really make a lot of sense if you actually go into game and use them. And now, granted, that doesn't mean it's a good system, or like we're obviously changing based off of our feedback and stuff like that. But it's very different. Like that burst of thing in the middle of a fight thing is not an unusual concept in games like this, and it's one I do hope we eventually revisit because I thought it was really fun.
Yeah, I think we'll find a good place for it eventually.
Yeah.
I think what we might have wanted to do differently is we would have done it in a smaller section of the tree structure. The fact it's like everywhere is complicating things right now.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to see its like soon. It's just going to be in a smaller section of the system where we can refine it, and then as it gets it working, then we might get propagated to more parts of the system as we get it down.
So let's talk about the epic moments a little bit, because one of the things that you came back was recognizing that players really liked the epic moments and felt like that was kind of lacking from the first preview. Do you have anything you're able to kind of tell us about where you are going with that?
Well, people liked certain epic moments.
That's true.
I don't think people really liked the idea of an epic moment because the majority of them were not good and unused. Like, no one's going to bat for Celestial Bombardment. It's more like when people say, or at the very least, I interpreted this, when people were saying we want epic moments, it means that they want what epic moments could be and not necessarily the ones they had right now. So with that in mind, as part of our pivot, we're actually designing ideally all new epic moments, ones that are a fair bit more impactful than like Celestial Bombardment and Rain of Arrows, but also just a lot easier for us to balance around. Because some of the ones that people are especially right now, like what does Blitz really represent right now beyond just numerical power? Because it's honestly quite a frustrating ability. Like it's like having to think in your mind of keeping up charges and not ones you can relatively easily get back. Like that's not something that we would kind of want to support and bring forward. We're trying to get rid of some of those things. So we really want to go beyond what the current Epic Destinies are doing. We want to enhance what people might have thought about epic moments in the past, not just bring the ones they have right now.
Yeah, so we're doing a full rev on epic moment style abilities.
Yeah.
That you'll see that in preview too.
In theory, one in each tree, possibly a multi-selector, but we're still looking into it. Probably in tier 5. Probably something that does something real substantial, but has a pretty beefy cooldown.
So which tree gets the I turn into a Marilith one?
If I can answer a chat question, we're doing this revamp, and we're not doing legendary destinies. That's the whole point of this, is to make epic destinies, and we're not going to go make 12 more even legendarily more of those. we're not doing that. These are built to be expandable,
right,
horizontally and vertically. We're not going to make a third thing in it.
Yeah.
Right. We kind of already talked about that. Do we know yet what's going to happen to some of the Destiny-related store items, like the keys and calls of Destiny?
Completely gone. They're just not going to work anymore.
Light them on fire.
It's actually something that it's something we talk about internally a lot. And like in this particular case, if we were to go through the effort of making sure all of those e-store items had a use in the new system, that would mean, for example, doing things like making it so you still had to level epic destinies. And in some cases, we have to sacrifice our potential monetization for a system that is better. So yes, we are going to not make as much money, but because rather than charging people money just to use our that thing, they're just going to get to level them up. But it's a better system. So that's a trade-off we're making.
We'll probably, if there's a need to do some kind of conversion. We'll have more information about that as we would get closer to the debut of the system. But in general, the keys and the calls that you have, you can use them right now, to level up your Epic Destinies and that. But they are not intended to be used beyond that.
Yep.
Yes, just like when we revamped and we got rid of the Jewels of Fortune and we just turned them into a different Easter item. Like leaving the Jewels of Fortune in would mean leaving loot leveling in, which is bad. So leaving keys and calls in means leaving leveling in, which is something we don't want to do.
We're not so attached.
We'll have
to
more
these-
details as we get closer.
Yeah.
More or less.
Well, let's pivot and talk about the itemization at endgame, which I think is kind of at this point colloquially be called stat squish. So what about the current system doesn't work? What's changing, and how do those changes address what doesn't work?
Well, right now we have this situation where we've been making content at the level cap for a very long time. And for a while, how we would incentivize players to purchase the new content and run that new content is by raising the power level of the items found within that content. Now, that's something that we actually pivoted on relatively recently. If you'll notice, the itemization in Feywild is actually exactly the same as the itemization eye level wise as the ones found within Sharn. And Saltmarsh would also be the same as part of that. So, as part of this, when we're looking forward, that is not just enough to just kind of slow down on the power creep on this. We kind of had to fix a whole bunch of problems at the same time. We went into a lot of detail on this on the post, but there are a lot of systems right now that work totally fine from levels 1 to 28, and then at level 29, they simply stop working. Like Kenneth crafting for use during leveling is super awesome. The idea that you'd be able to tailor individual pieces to fill holes in your gear set so you can build a gear set that works for your specific character, that's phenomenal. We like players to have that kind of flexibility. But then you get to level 29 and those items just do not match up. They're not even close. And it also hinders us in future developments because people are like, oh, can you revamp for Kenneth crafting, this, and this? And the answer is yes, but it would never be used at endgame. Like there was just a significant portion of the game in which those systems just wouldn't get used. And we did all this effort to revamp the augment system, and now all through heroics, augments they're up to a more impressive standard. And then again at level 29, they just don't match up at all. So when we're looking at this and we're thinking, well, why don't we just, rip the band-aid off in this and snap all the level 29 loot to an appropriate standard. And as a consequence of this, we can go through and get rid of all of our crutches that we've had to use throughout the years in order to keep content appropriately scaled difficulty-wise. So if you'll notice, monsters in Sharn are more difficult than monsters found in Ravenloft because, well, the items in Sharn are better than the items found in Ravenloft. And if we go through and we get rid of that difficulty spike, and also that itemization spike, well, then suddenly what we have is a whole bunch of content that's now at the same level and is appreciably difficult and drops appropriately scaled loot that would match through all of that stuff. And then now all of those items are now more relevant to endgame. And suddenly now there's hundreds of items at level 29 that before just got priced out of content that now just fit together and they work. And a huge benefit for the players is that all this spike in difficulty at level 29, that's just completely gone. A monster in Sharn, and monster in Feywild, a monster in, all that stuff, they have the exact same amount of melee power, the exact same amount of range power, stuff like that. And so, ideally, content in those spaces, you're not going to end up in a situation where a quest that's level 30 versus a quest that's level 30, well, those are radically different in difficulties. If your DCs work in one, they'll probably work in all of them. I think it's just there's just so many different ways this benefits us from making it so much easier for us to make content without having to worry about individually scaling monsters, making it easier for us to make items without worrying that we're going to invalidate previous packs worth of items by just making those items but better with higher numbers. And making us the same item over again with higher numbers is not effective for encouraging players to engage in this sort of stuff. It's all about creativity and slot free up and stuff like that. And it doesn't feel good on our end to essentially push that forward in that way. It's a lot easier for us if we just make cool items, cool items people want, and that content is cool. And rather than being really, really complicated, it's it's about the same. And that was a really long answer. But there's a lot of benefits for us to doing this, and going forward, it makes us making itemization a lot easier. And we're really happy with how these balance changes have worked out so far. Like obviously, we've been iterating between previews and then again between preview and our live release. And we're pretty confident through all the people that have played it, ourselves included, that things feel appropriately scaled, and it's a lot easier for someone who's less engaged to just jump into that content without requiring a lot of only new gear. So that's it.
We should mention that this is actually with update 50, is it not? Not update 51.
That's correct. It's happening
yes.
very soon, compared to
Yeah.
very far away. I don't know. Do you have any questions about our implementation of this, or any have you tried any of the new stats out yourself, PJ?
No, my brain broke when I was contemplating what that meant for all of the gear, and then throw in the scroll seal and shard stuff. It was like, that's a lot of gear to consider all at once.
The good news
and
is
I'll
that
come back to this later.
yes, the good news is that since we're with very very few exceptions, we're just changing magnitudes on a global level. Like we're just adjusting a formula and that's it. If your gear set worked before, it's gonna work now. Like it's exactly the same things of gear, So just if it fit together before, it'll probably work later,
That's kind of what I'm banking on, to be
Yeah,
honest.
so
Although there is the added scroll seal and shard revamp, which, hey, great segue. Can you give us maybe like the 30-second flyover of that change?
it's going to be a lot easier to do all of the stuff. If you've got your old items that you've been waiting years to find that one lucky drop for, just convert them to the new stuff and do it. And it's going to be great. Get that cool sword you've always wanted, get that cool pair of goggles. If you hate this revamp and you just don't want to do it, I've left the old crafting system. I've just moved it a little down the ways. So even if you just don't want to do it, then you just go down there and put your old steel scroll shards in, and that's fine. All of the items got revamped if they haven't been revamped already, including the stuff that I missed the first time going through the Red Fens. The only caveat is that the legendary Sands items are not done. Like those, there's 64 of them, and I need to do a good job rather than just simply finish them. So those are going to come in a later patch, but the heroic and epic ones are fully revamped. So enjoy your cool Ring of Spell Storing, your epic one, which should now be far easier to make. And we're also changing how the Demon Queen flagging works, so it should be a lot easier to get into those raids. So if you've always had a fondness for that old content and just wish the items held up a little bit better, now they do, and go get all your cool level 20 stuff, and then upgrade to level 30 and have a really good time.
2 points I would mention. Your old ingredients can be converted, correct, into newer ingredients as well?
That's correct. If you've never liked to look at a seal scroll or shard ever again, you can go talk to the big fire elemental or the big magma brute, in the 12th, and say, I want to turn all this into stuff, and I'll be like, okie dokie, and you could just crunch all that away, and no more will drop, and you'll just be able to use these new cool ingredients instead. And the upgrade process is drastically streamlined rather than having to find individual items for every single item in the entire pack, which is a lot of them for several packs. You simply get a big chunk of them together, and then you put your heroic or epic item in there, and then you're done.
And you're going to be getting a per quest ingredient, essentially. So an ingredient, what's the formal terminology? Ingredient pack? Is that what we're calling it?
I call them in my mind pack ingredients, but that's a really weird. I don't expect that verbiage to catch on, because it's not really the catchiest of terms. Essentially, for each individual content pack within the 8 current Steel Scroll Shard things, which is the 7 current ones, and now Salt Marsh, which is the 8th one, you're going to get an ingredient in all of the chests in there. And if before it dropped a seal, it'll now drop its ingredients, and just get a big chunk of those together and take the item from it. So, for example, if I'm thinking about like Chronoscope, any chest within Chronoscope that would have dropped a seal from one of the raid items in Chronoscope, now it drops like fractured slivers of the the time shard, and just get a whole bunch of those and just put it in there with your Diabolist Docent, and then you're done. So you don't need to go find the individual Diabolist Docent Seal Scroll shard. You just need to play Chronoscope a few times, and you're good.
Sounds good to me.
This has been universally well received. Really, no further changes.
There is a lot of loot in U50.
Yes.
Yes. That's why I said my brain broke.
Yes, I don't want to do any more loot for a while. So good luck everybody else that isn't me.
I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the gargantuan bag I have full of scrolls, seals, and shards.
It will probably take you a while to crunch these down. That's kind of the caveat, is that I don't know if it's going to be an efficient process, but I only have to do it once. So
Be a good thing to do when I'm maybe doing something like a meeting or something, like just sit here and like crunch things for during this meeting. So
yeah, it's a unfortunately, these are all distinct items, and like the DDO sometimes has some weird hangups about what's allowed where. But ideally, we never have to revamp the Seal Scroll Shard system ever again, unless something has gone catastrophically wrong. So this is the big one of the item revamps that have been happening for quite some time. Like I started back in update 36, and ideally it will now be done. So I'm excited.
And I'm assuming all of these ingredients are going to be bound to account.
I think so.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
So I'll just say again for people listening, if start by crunching your shards and your seals, maybe hang on to the scrolls, which are tradable. Just saying.
Don't say that out loud, or else I'm gonna have to change it.
Let's see. I did want to circle back on a couple questions in the chat. Do you know what will happen to epic hirelings that have epic destiny abilities?
They'll probably still continue to function, since we are actually leaving the current epic destinies in place. And we're just going to take your access to them away.
They will get sorted out. In the short term, in the short term, they're going to be fine. There may be a point where once we get past U51 that we will have to clean them up, because we will eventually want to move some of that data out of the system. But that'll be out in the past. We kind of probably need to give Epic Henchmen some love anyway, just to help them scale in a little bit better. A lot of them were made very early off.
As a note, internally we call them henchmen. So when we say henchmen, we do mean hirelings.
Well, they named the files that, so like.
Yeah, they named the party Fellowship. So.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the people that were working on Lotro were the ones that were developing the hirelings system at the same time.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of that kind of internal to public-facing speak. Yeah,
I don't think that happened, but sure.
And then will the pack ingredients, are those going to be something that'll be tradable in chests, or is that going to be kind of more like the?
They'll be tradable in chests. They'll be. I don't. Frankly, with the amount of times this content gets run, I do not expect players will have to grind for anything for a very, very, very long time. Our turn-in rates for this are incredibly generous, so it's incredibly likely that like if you just have a whole bunch of bags of this stuff, then like you're set. You're probably set for life. Like I don't expect that part to be part of the grind as a whole. It's mostly just the grind for the base items.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about the monster changes. So what's true about monster and content difficulty now, and what's going to be changing?
Sure. So effectively, with the stat squish, some people lost power. However, the proportion they lost power is relative to other elements they had. So we didn't do anything about filigree, and past lives, for example, did not change. So people who had built into those systems are actually less affected by the squish than other people. We adjusted the monsters to the people who are most affected by the squish to basically make them even. As a result, this is actually it's going to feel like a net buff for most people who basically have advanced into the system, because we've basically we tried to neutralize it for someone who was like, hey, I just got to level 30 for the first time ever, and I'm just getting loot. Like, we basically tried to make sure their experience was even, which means people who had built up their sentient weapons and have past lives, they're actually, the monsters basically got easier. We have a long-term goal, which we're going to continue working on through U51, of making epic levels less grindy, which means monster statting is going to go down. And that basically that kind of adjustment of monsters is going to percolate all the way back down to level 20 epics. So the jump between, there's basically right now a big stat jump between like where you graduate how heroics into epics, and that is going to shrink.
Yeah, we're really cognizant that like these kinds of changes are like it's a big change, like it really is, and so we're trying to overcompensate for this.
Yeah.
Just so we can be sure that everyone's having a good time.
I think I saw something that there was like one boss that's going from like 3,500 melee power to like 2,800 melee power or something.
Yes,
like some big
in order,
changes.
Yes, as part of this, Brent actually can speak to more this more accurately.
Yeah, we did a pass on all the raids back through Sharn pretty much. There was one raid we looked at that didn't need to get adjusted just because it ended up being on the easy side, but
I'm guessing
otherwise
that wasn't too hot to handle.
No, we touched too hot to handle. It was
Too hot to handle.
Nemesis Project. We didn't think you really needed much help with Nemesis Project. So yeah, we toned down all the rage just because the raid statting was special and how it interacted with stuff. We're pretty confident for the most part when you log in on U50, it's going to feel easier. Pretty much almost across the board. And what'll happen is that 2 weeks after the launch, we're going to basically have accumulated a lot of quest data of people playing through, and we're going to look at the average completion times, and if there's more work to be done, we'll do it. But we're basically aiming for the game we're aiming for a pacing change of just like the monsters are going to lose a little bit of their edge. And that will eventually get propagated all down through epics. Like the epic cycle will get less grindy is the end goal.
Yeah, this is a good proof of concept for how we might potentially change difficulty in the future. And like if it works here, we can move around.
And if I understand correctly, so like basically Sharn and later content was kind of propped up in difficulty level. So we're expecting Feywild, Sharn, and kind of stuff in between to be coming down to more Ravenloft level rather than Ravenloft be going up.
Yeah, we were basically in this holding pattern back in Sharn where we were increasing item level, but we weren't increasing quest level. So that's when we introduced the concept of like tier 2 legendaries, where it's basically like there's this level 32 content, and then there's this tier 2 level 32 content where the monsters and the loot are better. And now, because we're eventually going to be moving beyond this, we're basically stripping out that system, so all level 32 is going to be even with each other, but in terms of monster difficulty. But like Feywild and Sharn, they were substantially buffed beyond the other level 32 content, so they will feel much easier beyond anything else.
Jerry, I can answer a chat question. Mob changes, like I answered this on Discord a whole bunch of times. Right now, a monster in Feywild and a monster in Sharn and a monster in Ravenloft, if they're the same, like they're scaled exactly the same. And when players went in and tested it, they were testing against monsters that hadn't been adjusted. For example, the Orthons and Vision of Destruction, which did get adjusted. It's like mob damage absolutely did change. It absolutely did.
So to put it another way, there's some variance in where things have been changed and where things haven't been changed, and everything's not.
Yes, the complication arose because our blanket changes of removing that buff. Monsters in those raids didn't actually have that buff. They were adjusted by hand, and then when they actually got adjusted by hand, then now their difficulty has changed in between those previews.
Yep. I'd also speak to some people who have posted like completion times in a Reaper playthroughs. You actually have to play a lot of Reaper playthroughs to handle all the RNG that happens in Reaper difficulty because of the champion spawns and so forth and so on.
Like a single Doom Reaper can really move things around.
You could have a lot of variance in a single Reaper playthrough.
You mean like the time I got 3 Dooms and a Vengeance at the end of Death House?
That was a really quick playthrough, right? It was
Yeah,
really
like-
short, wasn't it? Like that. But that's why, that's why, we might, we're gonna get a really good data set. We're gonna get like a full 2 weeks data set of all the players playing, and then we'll see what happens. And so if it ain't perfect, we will we'll have a very good idea of how much we need to move it then.
So I got kind of 2 more questions related to this. One, Jerry kind of touched a little bit on timeline, because there's a lot of changes. Some of these changes we're talking about are really spread across update 50, update 51. Right, so we're getting the epic itemization and at least some of the monster changes with 50, and then the epic destinies and maybe some monster changes with 51.
No, there will be
Yes.
monster changes with 51.
Yeah, there will.
Yes.
The changes in 50 are primarily related to the change that happened in items, but there will likely be further changes in 51 related to how destinies interact and the stats involved there.
The point to understand is that itemization only changed at the tippy top, which is why we haven't we didn't tackle it all in one go. And we're also, because we're revamping the Destinies, we want to do the monster work at the same time as we're revamping the Destinies, because
we just want to be sure that everything's kind of like, it doesn't make sense if our danger zones are like, what if we adjust monsters for Epic Destiny thing and then our Epic Destinies end up stronger than they were before? You know what I mean?
It's just we don't want to do it twice.
Yeah.
It's just like, but we're gonna do it in 51. Yeah, we just don't want to end up doing it twice.
And
we're gonna could change and
So we'll get epic itemization changes and some monster, kind of the top end monster changes with 50, and in 51 is going to be the epic destinies, and then kind of changes more in the broad scope of epic.
Yeah. You might still see some toward the top depending on how Epic Destinies shake out, but you'll see them more broadly throughout all of Epics than you would with the U50 changes.
Right. And then the other question I have is, what, if anything, is changing about Reaper with all of these changes?
Nothing.
Nothing.
We're not doing anything
yet. Nothing yet.
We've got long-term thoughts on Reaper, ways to streamline it, ways to possibly make it harder, ways to make it more warding, all kinds of things, but none of them are in 50 or 51. So
we have learned quite a lot about like how DDO players respond to difficulty and what kinds of difficulties really entice them since Reaper mode's inception. But we got one overhaul at a time. We're gonna do this overhaul, then we're gonna do the next overhaul, and then we're gonna think about maybe a third overhaul, but not right now.
It seems like you'd probably want to get Epic and all that stuff dialed in before you try to change Reaper. Seems like a good order to go into.
It's this Epic Destiny thing is a huge priority for us on the systems team.
Yep.
It's really what we're working on, what we're thinking about, and we want to make sure we're nailing it before we jump off and do the next cool thing.
On our end right now, U50 is just about done as far as systems is concerned, with us having the release next week. So we're starting to move back into looking at Destinies, looking at the overall system, starting to get back into getting the next preview together. It's going to be a bit, but we're getting there now, and it's the main focus for the whole systems team.
Yeah.
So let's take the whole thing back together. What's kind of the goal for what player experience should look like on the other side of 51?
More fun.
Yeah, I'd say a more interesting, more diverse experience throughout all of Epics.
Yep. It should be fun. It should be fun to level up. It should be fun to find new and awesome and totally unintended build combinations. Should be more fun to play a character that you like with the aesthetics that you like, with the tree that you like, or trees as it goes, without worrying that you're wasting XP by not running it on off Destiny. It should be fun to just, play with all the cool new stuff that we're putting together. Yeah, and it's kind of like what game design is really all about. Is like we're trying to make DDO really really fun because then people will want to play it.
Right.
Like that's how it goes.
Yeah, version 2 is typically better than version 1.
Yeah.
So this is we're doing this is the next version of the Epic Destiny system.
Yeah.
And we're pretty confident it's going to be a lot better than the original. So.
So on that note, Torc, are you ready to talk about version 2 of the pit yet?
Epic. So I actually thought about epifying the pit once, and I was going to put a gigantic slime monster at the bottom, like a raid style slime bot. Like, could I actually make a raid fight out of a slime? But I don't know when I'm going to get around to doing that. Maybe I'll farm it out to someone else. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's the questions I had about the Epic experience. If that's all you guys have time for, that's great. But I have a couple other questions if you got some time, or we can call it here.
I had nothing better to do.
I am still recovering from U50, so it could easily be distracted from working.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a little time here. I myself have to go in a little bit, but we can answer a few questions before we wrap it up. Sure.
Well, let's talk about Horizon Walker a little bit. Where do you see this new universal tree fitting into character builds? What role will it fill for players?
Sure. So it's a tree that has a couple of focuses. One is bow DPS. One is kind of dexterity builds a little bit, and the other is avoidance defenses. So as a tree, I see it really filling a niche for a lot of builds that could be good with bows and need that little bit of extra help in the DPS department. I see it as an extra tree for rangers that have taken Deepwood Stalker or Arcane Archer or both that want to bolster their bow damage. I could definitely see some melee builds taking it for the defensive qualities as well as the dexterity trance that's in there. So it's kind of a well-rounded tree that does a lot of different things, and I think has a good place in a pretty wide number of builds. It should expand the number of builds that can be viable with bows quite a bit.
I love asking questions about hardcore because I think it's a really fascinating place to look. We just wrapped Hardcore Season 4. What did you guys see this season that you found kind of interesting?
Campaigns may have been a little bit too hard.
They seem to like that.
It's a teeny tiny, so it's a smidge too evil.
No.
Just the little tiniest bit. No, I think it was cool. I think that people really. I think that especially the symbiont champion, people really liked that added challenge. It feels like a lot of people liked the return to like the single life thing rather than our previous season, which, if I remember correctly, had multiple lives you could earn. Yeah, and seems pretty cool.
Yeah,
I think people liked it.
We did see one player in particular who got Reaper wings this season. That was pretty incredible to see. That was neat. Yeah.
I've been to ask you, Jerry. We should put a statue of that guy in the Hall of Heroes, right?
I'm not opposed to it. That sounds cool
like
to
thing
me.
we could probably do, right?
Now,
Is this a bad time to mention that he's actually been hanging out in the chat watching? And
I asked that specifically. I specifically did that because I knew he was here.
Yeah.
Answer your chat question. We did not do that, but I am actually still thinking about maybe patching that in for the epic things. Depends on how this goes.
What's that? I can't see the chat.
So our actually, one sec. I have to sneeze really, really awkwardly. The wrong moment in my life. Never mind. I've overpowered it. So our right now our legendary raid items get an eye level bump of about a level and 2/3 of a second level, and players were suggesting that we do the same thing for epic raid items, so levels 20 plus. Gotcha. And I'm kind of considering that. The good thing about this revamp is this is like astoundingly cool for DDO. I know this is going to sound really silly, from the outside looking in, but we actually have the ability to now change those items on the fly without forcing everyone to put them into a box that deletes the item and
Yeah.
gives them the exact copy of those items.
A lot of older items were set up in a very static way because that's just how they were built at the start of DDO, and since then we've done a lot of work to make items that we can easily adjust the power of, but bringing those back to older items harder than it sounds.
Yes.
So this pass means most of the older items in the game now have that.
At the very least, all
And-
of the epic ones, those heroic
Yeah.
packs and the epic ones.
Yeah, there's definitely some outliers still, but
Yeah.
this very much updates a lot of the game in a way that we can balance a lot more easily.
Yes. So
Sort of on that note, we should probably, I don't remember if we mentioned it earlier, but if you're going to change your old epic scroll seal shard items into the new versions, make sure the augments are out, make sure the sentient gems are out.
yeah, that's an unfortunate area of DDO that we have not done a drastic improvement on, unlike the rest of itemization, in which this process does literally delete that item's version and give you a new one. So I put warnings all over the release notes. I even put a specific warning in the actual description of one of the most special of the new items or the revamped items, the gem of many facets. Just please be very careful. So
I would say, hey, I thought it was really cool that the season 2 champions made it to live. That was fun.
yeah, do you like them?
I love the variety. If it was up to me, like every month would be a different suite of champions. They would just rotate constantly.
That sounds rad. I really like that. I think that's a great idea.
I mean, that is something potentially in future seasons if we do kind of this boutique champion route in the future. It gives us another opportunity to maybe do something like that for live, or live under certain conditions in the future as well. So, who knows?
I mean, I like champions, and I like reapers. To be honest, like they kind of get stale over time. Having new ones is always lots of fun for me, anyways. Any hints maybe on what we might see for Hardcore Season 5?
Nothing but oozes. Only oozes.
No, unfortunately, is the answer. We can't really talk about season 5 yet, but we do have a season 5 in the works. And I think in terms of timing, the best we could really say today is later this year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, right now we're focused on a whole bunch of revamps.
Right.
And
presumably at least after update 51. So
yeah, ideally,
I think so. Yeah. I think
ideally
so.
not right in the middle of
Probably.
there.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll tell. We'll,
Yeah.
we'll let you know as soon as we.
Yep.
Sure.
As soon
we're
as we
ready.
figure it out, we'll.
Yes, I mean some of that depends on when 51 lands. Also,
Right.
again, like we're early in the process right now, so
We don't want to rush this kind of overhaul. It affects everybody.
And the other questions I just have are about Saltmarsh. We're kind of getting close to seeing Saltmarsh on live. Is there anything you're really excited to see players go through and experience?
Yes. So I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the. I've been building secret things for each expansion or each large release, and this one is my most impressive and most convoluted yet. I imagine it will take 2 months rather than Dull Dagger's 1 month. So best of luck, everybody, and let me know if you figure it out.
I just love the bullywugs.
That's what I was going to say. Cool bullywugs. Yeah.
Yeah, glad we went with that.
Well, in Saltmarsh itself, right? Another
Yeah.
classic setting to bring to the game. So.
Well, thanks very much for spending some time with us today. Really appreciate you guys being here. Anything else you want to say before we close out? Teases or anything you want to, Jerry? Do you want to kind of plug Saltmarsh some more? Or
Just that you can find more information on DDO.com. Next week, when Saltmarsh goes live, you'll be able to purchase it in the DDO market. I would also say that VIPs are going to get a 10% discount if they are VIP during that checkout process. And also stay tuned for 1 month as of the release of Saltmarsh. We're going to be doing a special VIP reward. So you'll log into the game between, I have to go off the top of my head, but like August 4th to September 4th, and you'll get some elixirs of discovery specifically for being VIP, which will help you get a little bit better chance at named loot.
You get to see a giant crocodile do a barrel roll.
That actually did sound kind of fun.
It is.
I do remember for some reason when I think I was traveling, watched when things with animals go wrong, and a tamer for a crocodile getting his arm chomped, and then the crocodile barrel rolling with the guy flailing on the other end.
Yeah, we tried to deliver on our version of that. There's the bullywugs are pretty cool too. There's a nightmare if you can find him. He's out there.
I did see that in the promo video.
Yeah.
So
There's
exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for checking us out today. Thanks again to the devs and to Standing Stone Games for letting us borrow the devs for a little over an hour, and to all the contributors for DDOCast, and to Wizards of the Coast and to Cyber Ears for hosting the podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website at DDOcast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. If you have a DDO-themed webpage or you Twitch DDO and you'd like to be featured on our website, you can email us at DDOcast@gmail.com. Also, Jerry, where's a good place to let folks know? Because you come up with this chronicle every week, and I know you're always looking for stuff to put in there.
Yeah, sounds good. Just email any submissions that you want to ddo@standingstonegames.com.
Yeah, so hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff, including various adventures in DDO and D&D Tabletop, including some other games. If you have a comment on this episode, a question you'd like to hear us answer, a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or you just want to say hi, you can email us at DDOcast@gmail.com or leave a comment. Jerry, you want to do the little closing ditty?
Sure. May all your attack rolls be crits and all your chests level appropriate. Have fun, and don't forget to gather for buffs.